Hello, everybody. I just immediately started to make this episode when I saw this title on the New York Times. Steve Bannon is onto something. I said that Ezra Klein is my favorite New York Times employee, and he has his own podcast that's pretty good too. But he doesn't shy away from, the problems that are inside the Democratic Party and the left and the urban population. So I saw this. Steve Bannon is onto something on the New York Times. Look at it. Look at it. It's right there. It's number one opinion article on the New York Times. Ezra Klein has got some guts, man. He doesn't joke around. You know, he talks about how the more educated you are, the more prejudiced you are, the more intolerant you are, statistically, and this and that. So here we go. Steve Bannon is on to something. This will be quite the article because I already read the beginning. In his 2020 book, Politics is for Power, Eitan Hersh, a political scientist at Tufts, sketched a day in the life of many political obsessives in sharp, if cruel terms. And guys, this is me. I've never gotten Twitter or had a Twitter or been on Twitter. I was on Twitter sometimes to check gaming company updates, but Reddit, I would be on Twitter through Reddit as a periphery and then also on the New York Times, so you hear about whatever Trump tweeted. And this is a perfect description of what I was for a long time during the Trump era. I refresh my social media feed to keep up on the latest political crisis, then toggle over to another social media site to read clickbait news stories. Then over to YouTube to see a montage of juicy clips from the latest congressional hearing. I then complain to my family about all the things I don't like that I have seen. That described me. So as soon as I read this quote, I stopped reading and started to record this episode because I want to show, how I read this stuff and how I react and what my issues are with it and how you can kind of not just, you can read and get something out of it without having to be affected, without having to be totally on board with whatever you're reading. So to Hersh, that's not politics. It's what he calls political hobbyism. And it's close to a national pastime. A third of Americans say they spend 2 hours or more each day on politics. Of these people, 4 out of 5 say that not 1 minute of that time is spent on any kind of real political work. It's all TV news and podcasts and radio shows and social media and cheering and booing and complaining to friends and family. Real political work for Hersh is the intentional, strategic accumulation of power in service of a defined end. It is action in service of change, not information in service of outrage. This distinction is on my mind because, like so many others, I've spent the week revisiting the attempted coup of January 6th. Oh, guys, Ezra Klein, there you go. See, remember when all the January 6th stuff was coming and I said, it's a waste of time. Stop wasting your breath. They are wasting their time. And it looks like Ezra Klein was feeling the same thing. Because if you want to know what I try to be a lot like Ezra Klein. Just not with the New York Times. If I was him, I would start being an independent. He has a big enough name now. He can go away from the New York Times and be his own person. Because, I can't really say that I like the New York Times very much because of the January 6th. Just like this, they support political hobbyism. They are outraged. This here. It's all TV news and cheering and booing and complaining. And not 1 minute of that time is spent on any kind of real political work. So they suck you in and they get you outraged. It's all just outrage media. It's all outrage stuff. But you never actually go out and beat Trump, really. The only thing you can do is vote. But if you're not politically active, you can't vote. You can't have grassroots, so you don't get your own candidates in the first place. So anyway, Real political work for Hirsch is the intentional, strategic accumulation of power in service of a defined end. It is action in service of change, not information in service of outrage. Information in service of outrage. That describes the media. All of it. If you think Fox is better, it's worse. So, I've spent the week revisiting the attempted coup of January 6th, marinating in my fury toward the Republicans who put fealty toward Donald Trump above loyalty toward country, and the few but pivotal Senate Democrats who are proving day after day that they think the filibuster more important than the franchise. Let me tell you, the tweets and columns I drafted in my head were searing. Yeah, I was always the same way. But fury is useful only as fuel. Yeah, I realize that it never actually did anything for me. We need a plan B for democracy. Plan A was to pass H.R. 1 and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Neither bill, as of now, has a path to President Biden's desk. Oh, that's okay. All Democrats will do is just complain. All they will do is complain about how things should be instead of actually doing anything. And adjusting to democracy is making things happen in the country that you live in with the constituency that you live with. You don't get to just operate in a world where everybody agrees with you unless you want to be a dictator. Anyways, neither bill has a path to Biden's desk. We're continuing with Ezra Klein now. I found that you provoke a peculiar anger if you state this, as if admitting the problem were the cause of the problem. I fear denial has left many Democrats stuck on a national strategy with little hope of near-term success. In order to protect democracy, Democrats have to win more elections. And to do that, they need to make sure the country's local electoral machinery isn't corrupted by the Trumpist right. The people thinking strategically about how to win the 2022 election are the ones doing the most for democracy, said Daniel Ziblatt, a political scientist at Harvard and one of the authors of How Democracies Die. I've heard people saying bridges don't save democracy, voting rights do. But for Democrats to be in a position to protect democracy, they need bigger majorities. Yeah, one would think. There are people working on a plan B. This week, I half-jokingly asked Ben Wilker, the chairman of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, what it felt like to be on the front lines of protecting American democracy. He replied dead serious by telling me what it was like. He spends his days obsessing over mayoral races in 20,000-person towns, because those mayors appoint the city clerks who decide whether to pull the drop boxes for mail-in ballots, and small changes to electoral administration could be the difference between winning Senator Ron Johnson's seat in 2022 and losing the race and the Senate. Winkler is organizing volunteers to staff phone banks to recruit people who believe in democracy to serve as municipal poll workers, because Steve Bannon has made it his mission to recruit people who don't believe in democracy to serve as municipal poll workers. I'll say this for the right. They pay attention to where the power lies in the American system, in ways the left sometimes doesn't. I would say in ways the left never does. Bannon calls this the precinct strategy, and it's working. Suddenly, people who had never before showed interest in party politics started calling the local GOP headquarters or crowding into country conventions, eager to enlist as precinct officers. ProPublica reports. They showed up in states Trump won and in states he lost, in deep red rural areas, in swing voting suburbs, and in populous cities. The difference between those organizing at the local level to shape democracy and those raging ineffectually about democratic backsliding, myself included, remind me of the old line about war. Amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. Right now, Trumpists are talking logistics. Yep. But that's because Democrats don't have anything that they want to go to war for. Democrats aren't willing to die for anything. So they can't even fight a political war, let alone an actual war. Trumpists aren't like that. We do not have one federal election, said Amanda Littman, a co-founder of Run for Something. We have 50 state elections and then thousands of county elections, and each of those ladder up to give us results. That's how this country was designed. That way, because local governments are more responsive to the constituency. While Congress can write, in some ways, rules or boundaries for how elections are administered, state legislatures are making decisions about who can and can't vote. Counties and towns are making decisions about how much money they're spending, what technology they're using, the rules around which candidates can participate. An NPR analysis found 15 Republicans running for Secretary of State in 2022 who doubt the legitimacy of Biden's win. In Georgia, the incumbent Republican Secretary of State faces two primary challengers who hold that Trump was 2020's rightful winner in Georgia. Trump has endorsed one of them. The duties of a state secretary of state vary, but in most cases, they are the state's top voting official and have a role in carrying out election laws. Nor is it just secretaries of state. Voter suppression is happening at every level of government here in Georgia. We have 159 counties, and so 159 different ways boards of elections are elected and elections are carried out. So we have 159 different leaders who control election administration in the state. We've seen those boards restrict access by changing the number of ballot boxes. Often our black members on these boards are being pushed out. Yep. I can confirm that happens. I've done enough research to know that this is a real thing. It's pretty messed up. America's confounding political structure creates two mismatches that bedevil democracy's would-be defenders. The first mismatch is geographic. Your country turns on elections held in Georgia and Wisconsin, and if you live in California or New York, you're left feeling powerless. Well, that's because your power's already been accounted for and you're not on the margin. But that's somewhere between an illusion and a cop-out. Yeah, thank you. See, like I said, Ezra Klein's on my page a lot of the time. We're on the same page more often than not. A constant complaint among those working to win these offices is that progressives donate hundreds of millions to presidential campaigns and long-shot bids against top Republicans, even as local candidates across the country are starved for funds. Democratic major donors like to fund the flashy things. Presidential races, Senate races, super PACs, TV ads. Amy McGrath can raise $90 million to run against McConnell in a doomed race. But the number of city council and school board candidates in Kentucky who can raise what they need is... She trailed off in frustration. Well, I would say Amy McGrath herself needs to realize that. But anyways... The second mismatch is emotional. If you're frightened that America is sliding into authoritarianism, you want to support candidates, run campaigns, but few local elections are run as referendums on Trump's big lie. They're about trash pickup and bond ordinances and traffic management and budgeting and disaster response. Well, yeah, that's politics. Linda Hidalgo ran for county judge in Harris County after the 2016 election. Trump's campaign had appalled her, and she wanted to do something. It's the type of seat that only ever changed who held it when the incumbent died or was convicted of a crime. But it controls the budget for the county. Harris County is nearly the size of Colorado in population, larger than 28 states. It's the budget for the hospital system, roads, bridges, libraries, the jail, and part of that includes funding the electoral system. Hidalgo didn't campaign as a firebrand progressive looking to defend Texas from Trump. She won it by focusing on what mattered most to her neighbors. The constant flooding of the county. Do you want a community that floods year after year? She won, and after she won, she spent $13 million more on election administration and to allow residents to vote at whichever polling place was convenient for them on election day, even if it wasn't the location they'd been assigned. So then, Ezra, I guess I'll close out. I'll just read some more excerpts as we close this one out. If you want to fight for the future of American democracy, you shouldn't spend all day talking about the future of American democracy. These local races that determine the mechanics of American democracy are the ventilation shaft in the Republican Death Star. These races get zero national attention. They hardly get local attention. Turnout is often lower than 20%. That means people who actually engage have a superpower. You, as a single dedicated volunteer, might be able to call and knock on the doors of enough voters to win a local election. Or you can simply win one yourself. That's what Gabriela Cazares Kelly did. Cazares Kelly, a member of Tohono O'odham Nation, agreed to staff a voter registration booth at the community college where she worked, in Pima County, Arizona. We keep blaming students for not participating, but it's really complicated to get registered to vote if you don't have a license. The nearest DMV is an hour and a half away, and you don't own a car. Cazares Kelly learned that much of the authority over voter registration fell to an office neither she nor anyone around her knew much about, the County Recorder's Office, which has authority over records ranging from deeds to voter registrations. It had powers she'd never considered. It could work with the postmaster's office to put registration forms in tribal postal offices, or not. When it called a voter to verify a ballot and heard an answering machine message in Spanish, it could follow up in Spanish, or not. I started contacting the records office and making suggestions and asking questions. I did that for a long time, and the previous recorder was not very happy about it. I called so often the staff began to know me. I didn't have an interest in running till I heard the previous recorder was going to retire. And then my immediate thought was, what if a white supremacist runs? Well, then you get a lot of the country. So in 2020, she ran and she won. Now she's a county recorder for a jurisdiction with nearly 1 million people and more than 500,000 registered voters in a swing state. One thing I was really struck by when I first started getting involved in politics is how much power there is in just showing up to things. If you love libraries, libraries have board meetings. Go to the public meeting. See where they're spending their money. We're supposed to be participating. If you want to get involved, there's always a way. And that ends the article. And this is basically a giant, this is what Joe Biden meant when he said about progressives, I have no sympathy, because he was saying that when he was involved in, to get the civil rights movement to happen, they had to do all this stuff. They had to get involved in the local elections and actually do politics and sacrifice their time. It wasn't just outrage. The outrage was merely fuel. And, so yeah, I mean, Ezra Klein is basically like, well, it seems like the Republicans have declared war against the Democrats, and they have. So are you going to fight like it's a war, or are you just going to complain? And I think the answer is that they're just going to complain, because I think Ezra Klein is wasting his time here as well, because there's a reason why it's not happening. It's not because Democrats, it's like all you have to do, if you care, you'll go do it. So, no one's going to read this article and, change their minds and start sacrificing. It's because Democrats don't have anything that they want to sacrifice for. There's nothing they're really willing to die for, including voting rights. So, they're just not going to fight the way that a lot of these far right-wing people are going to fight. They're just not. Progressives included. So, it's hard to win a war if you're not willing to sacrifice. And these far-right people are quite rabid a lot of the time. And if they're not rabid, they're very encouraged and all that. And, I sympathize. It's like the other problem that Ezra Klein here has is, who said Democrats are even that much better a lot of the time, especially locally. Oh my God, especially locally. So to me, it's like, you can't even win it by just voting blue down ticket or something like that, because they're part of the problem too. They're part of the problem also. You look at blue states where there aren't any Republicans around. Democrats are also part of the problem. And I don't know why Democrats think that they're going to win just by giving everybody a mail-in ballot. It will help in the short term, but Republicans will adjust. If Democrats achieve their goal of increasing voting rights and people can vote easier, Republicans will be forced to adjust, and they will. And Democrats will quickly lose. just like they did in Virginia, or like they did in 2020, besides Donald Trump. I mean, like, Trump shot himself in the foot, but if Republicans don't shoot themselves in the foot, it's quite easy to beat Democrats. It's just like what Ezra Klein is saying here. Like, they have money but no passion. They have money but no drive. They're not willing to sacrifice. It's easy to beat them. So, it's easy to beat them outside of a city, that is. That is. It's hard to win inside a city, but like McConnell in Kentucky, no problem. Lindsey Graham, South Carolina, no problem. And even if you did give everybody a mail-in ballot, it still wouldn't matter. Look at Virginia. People don't like what Democrats, it's not what they stand for. It's not their messaging. It's just them in general. They're not very likable as a party. So, yeah, that's why people aren't willing to go all the way, Like, if they were likable, I think about, like, AOC. And I believe that AOC would be better at getting her own constituents to do this kind of thing that this article is talking about than most Democrats. Because she's at least genuine emotionally. Emotionally genuine. That's what Democrats are not. Like, I would say that Pete Buttigieg is not that. He's more of a technocrat. The more grassroots and populist a politician is, the more emotional they're going to be and the less rational they're going to be. Whereas if you want a detached technocrat like I do, you're going to get Pete Buttigieg's, but they're harder to sacrifice for. I feel like they're more for like official positions, like what old Pete's doing right now. So, like, the elections are always going to be pretty down and dirty like they used to be in this country. I think that this is a good place to stop. It's been long. We went through the whole article, but it's like the best. It's like a killer New York Times article. I love when Ezra smashes liberals on liberal forums. Because it's funny because, like, Democrats, like, I bet you there's only 168 comments. I'll bet you a lot of Democrats won't even read this. And then they'll just keep reading January 6th stuff to stay outraged. But they won't read this about why they should stop and why it's a waste of time. So, yeah. Cool, guys. Thank you. Till next time.